So we are continuing with the communion of persons. And as I spoke earlier, we are made for community of people. We are made to live in community, in classrooms and sports teams and families and churches. We are made to, in the image and likeness of God. God is a community of persons himself, the Trinity, and we are made for relationships where we give ourselves freely to one another in love and we receive love in return. And you can say the human body says, I am a gift. I am capable of giving myself freely to another person in in love. It doesn't have to be the intimate love with a man and a woman, but it can be a broader love in a sense of, friendship in a classroom, friendship on a basketball team, friendship in a neighborhood, friendship in a club. You are a gift to each other through your humor, through your sense of, you know, being, your person. And we are called to help each other, helping your neighbor, helping your friends. We are to, through our gifts, we all are different, unique gifts, and we are called to give of ourselves, our talents, to the basketball team, to the baseball team, to the classroom, in the sense of asking good questions that affects everybody else, or just being a good presence in the classroom. Your person is a gift, even in your family. So John Paul would say every person therefore has infinite value because they're created in the image and likeness of God, and they are to be treated with dignity and respect. And the only response, proper response, to a person is love. Because God himself is a communion of persons who loves. Of all the attributes about God, you only hear the Bible talk about God as love. It doesn't say God is all omniscient, God is ever present, God is infinite, God is omniscient. But it does say over and over, God is love. God is love. And we're made in God's image to love one another in a general, broader sense in the communion of persons love, and also the more intimate union between a man and a woman. But we are all called to love one another. That is what it means to be a person, to give yourself as a gift to one another. So the human body is a reflection of our Creator. And as you can see the picture there of the Father and Michelangelo's in the Sistine Chapel up on the ceiling, and you look up there and you see the Father there touching Adam, giving life to Adam. And this life that he's giving to Adam is not to be a solitary individual, but Eve was going to come from his rib, and they were going to bring forth a family, and they were going to populate the earth. So the Father is creating Adam and Eve in his likeness and image to have relationship, to love one another, and to give of oneself freely. And that is why that picture of Michelangelo just sticks out so much, because God gives us this grace, this ability to be a being in God's likeness, to share ourselves, to give of ourselves, to be like him. Now we're coming into this understanding of the spousal meaning of the body. The spousal meaning of the body is our call to self-giving love, which is written into our very embodiment as male and female. Now here you could say the spousal meaning in a very specific way is when a man and a woman spousally give themselves to each other, and it's written into the you might say the very physical nature of male and female, where they complement each other, where they are attracted to each other, where when they come and consummate the relationship, they bring forth a third. And that's the spousal meaning of the body, is a self-giving love. And that can be meant in a broader sense too, not just to intimacy, but, again, you're giving yourself in a classroom, yourself, being generous, being kind to someone in the hallway you don't even know. You're just helping somebody out on the street or a neighbor walking through the grocery store, or, the spousal meaning of the body. It's written into us to give of ourselves. We are to become a gift to one another in the communion of persons, where we learn to love and to be loved as God loves, and so to fulfill our highest calling, our destiny. So before the fall, this is how Adam and Eve saw each other. When Adam and Eve saw each other and they were naked, there was no danger of either Adam or Eve looking at each other as only as a bodily object to stir their emotions and stir up their desire, But when Adam looked at Eve, he saw the beauty of her personality, the beauty of her person, not just as an object, but a person with a body, and all of it was beautiful. So when Adam looked at Eve, she wasn't just an object, she was a person. You could say, sometimes John Paul would say, a subject. He is, they are a person who deserves respect. They are a person who deserves your love, your giving of yourselves to them in a brotherly or sisterly way in the community. So the spousal meaning of the body is a self-giving love. Now, how does porn affect us? Instead of seeing women as persons, today, because of our fallen nature, because of Adam and Eve and how they, at once they saw each other purely, but when Adam and Eve fell from the original innocence and justice, when they sinned against God, they lost that you might say, that immaculate or wholesomeness that came from God creating them. They they fell, and they had to cover themselves because they felt ashamed, and they felt like they're being looked only upon as an object, or could be looked upon as an object to be used for a person's pleasure, greedily looking at them in a way that's not giving them a sense of dignity, of their beauty, of their personhood. So porn, it treats people, you look at these objects, and they're pictures, and these pictures are to stir us up, if that's the meaning of what pornography is about. It's about, stirring up the eyes and with pictures to lead people to look at persons as objects to be used instead of persons to be loved. And Tanya Burleson, she was a porn star, and she was talking about how, making these porn movies that guys, sometimes would be punching you in the face, treating you very vulgarly, not respecting her. And she said it was never ending when they're doing these clips. You're viewed as an object, not as a person with a spirit that should be reverenced, that should be respected, that their body and spirit should be treated with dignity as behooves them because they're made in God's image. No, it's almost kind of like it's like a cutout cardboard. And it's just about the picture itself. Forget about the humanity of the person. It's just about the visual stimuli that she can bring to someone. And she says people do drugs because they can't deal with the way they feel ashamed. They feel interiorly, they feel so abused. And you might say, why do they do that? They don't want to do it. Nobody ever does. It's always because they're put in a situation, or from their own brokenness, from their own this or that. They fall into these situations, and it seems at first, make some good money. But from the abuse and from the hurt and from the effects of misusing your body, as I told you, when you misuse your body, it's going to affect your spirit. And nothing could be worth doing something like that destroys people. And another way that porn affects us is It affects our brains. It changes our brains over time by our actions. Like anything, if you do something long enough, you're going to start to get these neural pathways in your brain, and you are going to habitually um, act out and think a certain way whenever you are open to a particular thing that you've done over and over. And if you get used to seeing women on pictures, and you just used to, it's almost like kind of like you're taking something from that picture to stir you up instead of giving yourself out of love, out of generosity, out of kindness. You are taking. And that's the whole difference you could say about theology of the body. It's saying we are meant to give ourselves to one another as a community of persons, as friendships, on baseball teams and neighborhoods and friendships and classmates. Um, but on the other hand, porn is about you are taking this image to stir you up, and you're giving nothing. You're just taking. And the more you keep taking and to stir yourself up, you are forming things in your mind. This is the way you look at women. This is the way when you get away from a picture and you go out into the greater community and you see a woman, on the street or this and that, your mind is automatically going to go right back to that way of you've done over and over by looking at porn of something you take, something that's for you only to stir you up, instead of something as you give yourself as a brother or sister in Christ or a part of the community. You are to help one another and to look at one another with reverence and give a person dignity. So that is the problem with pornography. It affects you whether you know it or not, because the way it affects your brain over and over doing something, you are going to be affected. And it's just been scientifically proven. Many people are coming out with articles left and right talking about how your brain changes by your actions and how you can change them back. And that takes hard work because you've already made these furrows, you might say, or these neural pathways that your brain automatically goes in that direction. And if you keep doing it over and over, it's going to be a hard habit to break. So even when you date them or just speak with them, if you're a person who's used pornography a lot, it's going to affect you because you're going to think automatically, it's for me to take, for my pleasure or for my gratification. It's nothing about relating. It's nothing about a communion of persons where you give yourself as a gift to be kind, to build up others, to love others freely without trying to get something in return. That's what we're made for. We're made in the image and likeness of God to love as he loved. And we desire to be loved, but in a chaste, healthy way when that love is returned. So, in the first way, how porn affects us is it affects our relationships with other people. It affects our relationships, and our brains change over time. So, how do you want to be viewed? As an object to be used or as a person with unique dignity? And all of you, I'm sure, would say, I want to be a person who's respected with dignity, not to be used, not to be thought of just for what I can give you, instead of looking at another person as a person with unique dignity, value. And so it says porn robs the person of his or her dignity and humanity. Now, this is many years ago. It shows you how much things have changed. But in the year 2005, a study of 400 internet users showed a significant correlation between pornography use and loneliness. And it's just scientifically showing you is that the more you give into porn, the more you fall into this vice, it's kind of isolating you. It's like sin, we want to hide. We want to hide that part of our person. We want to hide what we have done. And it separates us from people. Sin just naturally separates us from people. Love and truth and and that brings us towards people. But sin separates us. Just like sin separated Adam and Eve from each other, where they had to dress and separated them from God. And so when you're doing porn, it's training you just to think about people to be used, not as people to be loved. And it said here in a 2005 study of youth between the ages of 10 and 17, it said there is a significant relationship between frequent porn use and the feelings of loneliness and major depression. Now, it's scientific. You're doing something that's isolating you. It's something that's kind of building shame within you, where you're learning to trying to, as young men, to grow in dignity and self-respect. You're doing something that makes you feel smaller. You don't feel good about yourself when you do it. It gives you instant pleasure, but afterwards, when you do it, it affects you, you know? Um, the world says porn is all about sexual freedom and pleasure. How TV sitcoms refer to porn, sometimes they call it adult entertainment. But the truth about porn is, at the core of it, it's all about bondage and misery. Dr. Peter Kaplonis, in his book Integrity Restored, says internet pornography is often referred to as the new crack cocaine because of how aggressively it takes over a person's life. A lot of you might say, come on, it's just a little pornography. It's not going to hurt anybody. Well, in some ways you might say, if that was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I would say yes. I would agree with you. A little porn, if you found it, like on the first time I saw pornography, I was like about 5 or 6 years old. I was with a bunch of kids in the alley. You know, we're just walking through the alley as kids would do. And we're outside this car repair place, dealership. And they throw out their old girly magazines through the windows and just get rid of them. And we'd find them as young little kids, and we would just like, wow, look at that. And we'd be mesmerized by a woman's body, of course, because God made us that way. And, you know, we'd fight over it and this and that. And one time I even brought it back to my father, showed it to my father. And he, of course, went, he ripped it up and says, you shouldn't be looking at that. That's not proper for you. And so, you know, way back then when we saw it, we see it once in a blue moon. And as a young boy, it's like you're aware of it, you know what's out there, but you don't ever hardly ever see it. But today, because we live in a technological society, it's so easy for young men, young boys, to get caught up. Just like Matt Fraud, he was 9 years old, and he was so touched, you know, moved by it, he wanted more and more. And God made us that way, but unfortunately, because of technology and plus because of maybe his own access to it, it just in 5 years or so, he was addicted. He needed to go to counseling. He needed prayer. He needed to work hard day in, day out to get out of this addiction, this compulsion that he could not stop on his own. And today, they say over 50% or 60% of men are being one way or another lured into this area, that they are somewhat maybe over their head, that they can't stop. And we have to be aware that at your young age, you just have to stop. There's no way about it. Just stop. And using the battle plan that I've talked about, and I can't emphasize it enough. I've heard stories left and right of how it affects young men. They can't stop. They thought it was harmless. They thought, oh, a little here, a little there. But because of technology, they get into a habit. They get in a habit of looking at it when they feel down and out, when they feel lonely, or because they in their brain there is this pathway that they just need this fix again, or they're so easily moved, and they, you know, they remember that how they felt last time they looked at it. And so their brain is kind of like, it's almost like having a carrot before you. It's kind of like your brain remembers. Remember last time you looked at that? You remember how it made you feel? And when you're down and out or feeling down about yourself or empty, your brain just kind of says, what about doing that? Because it's like, it's a pathway that you automatically think. And that's how addiction begins. You do it once, you do it twice. Your brain realizes how powerful the stimulus is. God made it that way because it made it for a man and a woman to come together, to stay together. It's like a supernatural glue that brings a man and a woman together when they share their sexual intimacy with each other. Well, when you're young men, you're called to live a chaste life, a life according to your state in life. And you're single men, so you're not supposed to act out. Now, it doesn't mean you won't struggle, and it doesn't mean you won't fall, but it means that you're called to keep your eyes focused ahead on God and what He's asking of you. And when you fall, you just get back up. But you can never think you can do it lightly. Hopefully, you fall into it instead of choosing to do it. If you choose to do it, you will eventually become addicted to it. But there's a difference when you fall into it because you don't want to, but say you're feeling down or it's late at night, you're weak and tired, you're going to fall into it. That is the difference. And none of us are supermen. We all have weaknesses, times when we're feeling down and out. And we have to realize that we have to be careful what we watch. We have to be careful of having a computer in your room or something at night, or your phone. All these things, they can be temptation. And that's why they call it the new crack cocaine. And it's amazing how aggressively it takes over a person's life because technology is so easily accessible. And it can have the same highly addictive effect on the brain as alcohol, as marijuana, or drugs, or, or crack cocaine. Now talking about the effect, the addictive effect on the brain. Now, when you're viewing porn, it creates a neurochemical response. It triggers a release of dopamine, which produces a high, which is intensified by the body's response in masturbation. And so it's kind of like your eyes, your mind gets stimulated, then it stimulates your body, and then there's this release. And this whole, you say, neurochemical response is part of God's plan for a man and a woman to come together, like I told you, kind of like this spiritual glue that is supposed to help unite a man and woman together. But as a single man or a single woman, we are not to use our bodies to stimulate ourselves because it has such devastating effects. I always say sometimes that in years past, I always draw on the board and I put the word poison down. And I always say, using your sexuality outside of the circle of marriage, it's like poison. It will destroy you. And the same here, as a married man. My use of sexuality outside of my marriage boundaries will be poison to me too, just as it's poison to you. Because we are called to live our lives using our sexuality according to the plan that God has put before us. If we're single, we are to remain single and to wait till the day we are married to use our sexuality. Or maybe we're called to be single. So we are called to use our sexuality in a chaste way, in the single state. But the porn's effect on the brain, it has, as it's been proven, this big study came out of England, and other psychologists and psychiatrists have shown this scientific reports that the response of the body to the use of drugs is very similar or is the same to the effect that porn does to the brain as alcohol or drugs to the brain. They even show pictures, and they've shown you pictures on screen saying, this is a person who's done crack cocaine or some other heroin drug, and this is a person who's done porn, and you couldn't see the difference because of the effect of the neurochemical effect on the brain over many years of misusing their body, not in the marriage state, outside the marriage state, in a compulsive way to get out of bad feelings, get out of loneliness, to get out of something, to stir them up, to do something that is a bad habit to do and that will have devastating effects on you. So, like any drug, as you know, a tolerance quickly develops and you need more of the same drug to get the same effect. And it's the same way with pornography. That is the key. Most guys say, hey, once or twice, big deal. But once you show that neural pathway in your brain, how it affects you, and your brain doesn't forget how you felt when you did that, it will always come back to you saying, hey, I'm feeling down and out. How about something to pick me up? Hey, what about that? That always picked me up. It's like your brain just thinks that way, or you're easily tempted or lured in that way of thinking. So as a man will spend more and more time viewing porn just to get the same effect he had a year ago. And he has to spend longer periods of 15 to a half an hour to an hour a day. And it becomes more and more extreme. You need more and more to get the same effects. And I always tell my boys, there's a study about, I think around 2000, that a lot of, I think it was IBM, had a lot of men using porn on the computers at work. And you might say, why don't they just wait till they get home? Why at work? And IBM was concerned because they weren't doing their work. They were doing other things, for their own self-satisfaction. And the company was losing money, business hours from these men. And you might say, well, these men they're highly successful, went to good schools, have a family. Why are they doing porn? It's because they got addicted. They thought, like everyone else who looks at it, oh, I can look at it. It won't affect me. I can overcome it. Come on. That's not the truth. It's wreaking havoc in men and women's lives all over the world. And the only way you can break it is to stop and ask God's grace. And some of you might need to see a counselor. Some of you might need to really talk to somebody to help you. What are some ways, and how can I be accountable to someone to help me break this pattern that I've already started a year or two ago? The effects it has on marriages and families, again, many people believe, looking at porn, it brought me happiness, an instant moment of joy. But afterwards, you realize you feel shame. Afterwards, you realize that it didn't bring you the happiness and joy you thought it would. There's more of a temptation. But porn has led many young people to believe that they can find happiness through many sexual encounters with multiple partners, with people. But actually, studies have shown that the opposite is true. That those who have chaste lives, who live lives of chastity in the sense of as single people, they don't act out, or they may fall once or twice, but they try to live their life as single young men and women according to their state in life, and they are trying to be faithful, and they have more consistent relationships that are more satisfying than those who view porn and live in this fantasy world. And it says over 56% of divorces today, it's because of an obsessive interest in internet pornography by one of the partners. Children are affected by porn through divorce and lost time spent with a parent. So those who do not view porn, they have much better satisfying and good relationships. So why is porn so hard to avoid? Why is it? Like when I was a young kid, Why was it so easy? I've seen it once, twice, over many years, a young kid finding a girly magazine in the alley here or there, We have this natural curiosity. We're curious. God made us to be curious with our eyes. It's kind of the way we're made. But why weren't so many people addicted back when I was growing up? Why weren't teenagers affected when I was growing up like they are today? And sometimes they call it epidemic portions. The Washington Post, New York Times, all have said that this is really spreading out of control. And the reason why it's so hard to avoid, it's everywhere. It's in movies, it's in television commercials, it's on buses, it's on billboards, it's on magazines that come in your mail about this particular dress or lingerie, And you can find it so easily on the internet. You're not even looking for it, and it just pops up in front of you for some ad coming upon you or something like that. It's just so easy, and you can get lured in, lured in slowly, like on a fishing pole. And the more, at times you feel weak and down and out, that's when you're going to get hooked because you're tired and it just stimulates you. It picks you up. And before you know it, you fell and said, why did I do that? Because you're weak. You're tired. You weren't feeling your normal self. And so why is porn so hard to avoid? It's because it's everywhere and it's so easily accessible through technology today than it ever was before when I was a young man. And just look at these old stats. They are old, and I'm afraid to know what they are today. It says, according to the Web Sense, in 2004, the number of porn sites went from 88,000 in 2000 to nearly 1.6 million. Wow, that is amazing. And then in 2002, there were 11,300 hardcore films released, compared to 470 by Hollywood. Those who make porn are doing it for one reason, to make money. Lots of money. And they don't care if they're destroying lives. They don't care if they hook people. They don't care if they are evil in what they're doing. They don't care. They want the money. And TV and media at first kind of helped secure the acceptance of pornography through sitcoms and so on. But now more and more people are realizing, and it's affecting, like I say, 56% of divorces. Society can't hide this big lie that TV or media presented, that it is really harmful and it's destroying lives. And they call it adult entertainment, but call it by its real name. It's just sin. It's just sin that's so destructive and devastating in people's lives. And this so-called entertainment netted $13 billion and $97 billion in 2007. I wonder what it makes today. It's sad to say. So I just want to encourage you. In part 2, we have one more part talking more about the theology of body and about porn and how to overcome it in your life. So God bless you, and get ready for the test that will be coming up this Thursday. We're going to have a test on it, and you'll use my PowerPoint slides to help you answer the questions. And we'll have a quiz today. I'm going to give you maybe 5 to 10 questions using this PowerPoint and the previous PowerPoint to answer some of the questions to get you kind of prepared for the test coming up this Thursday. Okay. God bless. Have a good day. Bye-bye.